Furry pom-poms are a cute, stylish finish for hats, and we can knit them ourselves. You'll want a furry yarn, and really Lion brand Fun Fur is the best one. Very few of the available furry yarns have the characteristics that this one does. It has a strong, thin core and only medium length lashes and no fuzzy spots, just lashes. And that's what makes it go through the knitting machine well. If you find another yarn that fits that description, that will be okay too. A single skein will make quite a few pom-poms. I'm working on my bulky Singer SK150 machine using every other needle. Any Japanese bulky machine will do the job using every other needle. Bulkies are the preferred machine, but I have succeeded with fur projects with this yarn using mid-gauge machines at every third needle or standard gauge machines at every fourth needle. All machines are at maximum stitch size, and you will want to hang a comb after E-wrapping the required 14 needles. Ignore any needles that are not in work. Just leave them back all the way at the back of the bed. Knit 12 rows at maximum stitch size. You may need to knit a little bit slowly, and on some machines, the hairs may catch on the gate pegs, so you can stop after knitting each row and give a downward tug if that should occur. Now lift the E-wraps and hang them on the working needles. It's actually best to do this with your fingers because it's easy to actually miss the openings in the E-wraps with a tool, and feeling around your fingers can feel the core and do quite a nice job. Knit 2 plain rows. The first one needs to be quite slow because you're knitting off 2 sets of furry stitches. Leave a nice length of yarn to work with, then snip or break the yarn and thread the tail into a yarn needle. Now work the needle through every stitch in order to gather off the pom-pom. You will notice that I'm using an enormous needle. If you want one like it, this is actually an upholstery needle. It's not truly necessary to have one so long, but in fact, it does help when we're trying to skewer through stitches that are hard to see into. And in order to see into them well, give a downward tug with the fingers of one hand to help you spot the opening with your eyes and point the needle into it. When all the stitches have been threaded onto the needle, pull the needle through so only yarn is holding the stitches, and lift all the stitches off of the machine. There should be 2 yarn tails, the long one that we just used and one that was left over from E-wrapping at the beginning. Pull the one that we just used to gather in the stitches. Pull it as tightly as you can without breaking it, of course, and knot it to the initial yarn tail. The pom-pom won't be impressive yet. Do not despair. The reason is that these eyelashes get caught in the knit stitches. Pluck it with your fingers or comb it with a comb. A vegetable brush also works quite well. And the longer you pluck or comb, gently of course, the more the eyelashes become freed and resemble fur. It's worth investing a few minutes in this job because it so enormously improves the appearance. And when you are finished, find where the yarn tail is still attached and stitch through the pom-pom in that area a couple of more times to anchor it firmly so that when we attach it to the hat, it will have a good base for the attachment. Now you can snip off the initial yarn tail, but not the final one. We need it. If you already have a hat or a hat pattern that you like, just make one and use the Fun Fur yarn tail to sew the pom-pom to the top of the crown. The yarn is strong and smooth enough to do that. But just so that everything is all in one place and you can successfully knit something today without running around, here's an easy hat that is slightly slouchy, will fit big kids to small adult women, is super quick, and only takes one bed. It has a hung hem, and the lining of that hem only uses every other needle. I'm not in love with the way that looks on the inside, but for people who find a doubled hem too hot or restrictive for them, this is a good option. And it looks just fine from the outside. These instructions will also work on a mid-gauge machine as long as you can match gauge with a very light number 4 or heavy number 3 yarn, getting 4.5 stitches, 6.5 rows per inch. You'll need a larger stitch size than I state in the pattern for your mid-gauge, of course. Super quickie hat pattern, nothing detailed. I cast on using every other needle across a span of 80 needles using Mary Lou's Liberty Plus yarn. This yarn performs similarly to Karen's Simply Soft and also Tam Nordic. So 10 rows using every other needle at stitch size 3, then bringing every needle into work and knitting on every needle for 36 rows, still at stitch size 3. I just hung the initial E-wraps, changed to stitch size 4, and now we're going to knit straight for a few rows. Mid-gauge knitters, remember that stitch sizes 3 and 4 probably won't work for you. You're more likely to need 4 to 5 and 5 to 6. 39 rows to be precise. Now we're going to knit one more row, but first change to the maximum stitch size. There we go. These larger stitches will simply make it easier to gather off the crown. Just as with the pom-pom, leave enough of a yarn tail to gather off the crown using a yarn needle. Secure the top of the crown tightly. Then use the remaining yarn tail to sew the edges of the work together. That will be a center back seam for the hat. The hem is, of course, 2 layers, and the hat will look nicest if you sew the layers together separately, inside to inside and outside to outside. After sewing the pom-pom to the hat, you may want to do even a little bit more plucking and fluffing. And that's it. You're ready to go.